Hi everyone, welcome to today's Snack and Learn webinar on the Falkirk Low Carbon Vehicle Hub, LCV for short. My name's Ricky Laing and I'm an Associate Director with WSP in Scotland. The photo that you can see on the first slide here is, it shows the Low Carbon Vehicle Hub, the gull wing canopies and a few cars charging up in the foreground. In the background we have Falkirk Stadium, and just above the facility pay close attention to the high voltage power lines above. I'll come on to that a bit later. Today I'm going to talk to you about the Low Carbon Vehicle Hub. As I said, I'll give you a bit of introduction and background. I'll go over some key highlights, some key challenges. I'll talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the key innovations on the project and the key takeaways. And at the end, we'll have time for Q&A. And I also should have mentioned earlier that the presentation is up on GoToWebinar as well for download. So, Scotland then. A map of Scotland to your right there. You can see the 32 local authorities that Scotland is made up of. Falkirk Council are one of the authorities right in the centre of the country. Okay, since I have a worldwide audience today, some of you are probably wondering, where is Falkirk and what is it famous for? Well, referring to the top right image, Falkirk is located centrally between Scotland's capital city, Edinburgh, and our largest city, Glasgow, in what is known as the Central Belt of Scotland. Referring to the bottom left map, Falkirk Stadium lies a short distance to the west of the M9 trunk road that connects Edinburgh to the north of Scotland, and the Low Carbon Vehicle Hub is located in the west car park of the stadium, as you can see circled in yellow there. There are several things that Falkirk is famous for. These include the Grangemouth oil refinery, the largest in Scotland, not very exciting. The Falkirk Wheel, that's a whole other presentation. The Alexander Dennis, the world's largest double-decker bus manufacturer, and the Kelpies, as shown in the bottom right photograph. The Kelpies are perhaps the best known of these and are the largest equine sculptures in the world, and were created by Scottish artist Andy Scott. The Kelpie's name reflects the mythological transforming beasts that possess the strength and endurance of 100 horses. So, on to some key highlights then. By way of an introduction, as I mentioned previously, my name is Ricky Laing, and I am the Commission Manager for the current 2021-23 Professional Service Commission WSP has with Falkirk Council. We have a long-standing relationship with Falkirk, as we have held this commission in various forms for over 14 years now. Our relationships with Falkirk Council officers is strong, and we consider ourselves to be their trusted partner. I am based in Scotland in our Perth office, which is just an hour's drive from our Falkirk client offices, and I very much hope you will enjoy this presentation today. I would also add that I am an electric vehicle user and have personally used the facility to charge up my vehicle. So a bit of background about the facility. In 2019, Falkirk Council approached WSP asking if we could help them with their low carbon vehicle hub. They had a feasibility report done by another consultant, and they want to know if the hub could be viably constructed at their chosen location. At that time, the WSP team did not realise what their contribution would be or appreciate the effect it would have. We were just an in-house team of a few highways engineers and mechanical and electrical services experts who got their heads together and developed a brief and scope for the works and put it in front of the council. Our services on this project included preliminary and detailed design, contract documentation and drawings, and construction supervision using the new engineering contract NEC 3 version. Up to that point, Falkirk didn't really have much in terms of charging infrastructure, and charging points were few and far between, so the facility in one project drastically increased Falkirk Council's charging capacity. The Falkirk Low Carbon Vehicle Hub was intended to deliver a step change in the availability and scale of electric vehicle charging infrastructure in the Falkirk area. The charging hub aims to create a 24/7, 365 days per year accessible EV facility in one of the country's most important economic areas. It's hoped that the hub will promote the uptake of electric vehicles in the area and drive as the drive towards carbon neutral vehicles continues at pace. Located at the eastern gateway of Falkirk, easily accessible from the M9 motorway, the Low Carbon Vehicle Hub has been constructed at Falkirk Stadium, home of Falkirk Football Club. The stadium, owned by Falkirk Council, lies at the start of the new electric A9 route, which seeks to provide a regular series of charger points along the main northern corridor of Scotland, right up to the very tip near John O'Groats. Passing through Inverness on the way, the idea is to place charging points at strategic locations throughout that route, and this facility kicks off the journey. Falkirk Council made use of the current professional service commission they had with WSP to bring together several different disciplines for a collaborative, multidisciplinary approach to the design and installation. The £1.4 million facility was partly funded by Falkirk Council and Scottish Government, and the project was completed in March 2020, slightly late but to budget, with WSP delivering an excellent service to our Falkirk client and also their funding partners. Some further key highlights. Open 365 days of the year for 24 hours per day, the facility boasts 26 charging bays, 10 rapid 50 kilowatt chargers, 16 fast 22 kilowatt chargers, with 3 of these being designated bays for disabled users. Each bay is 2.4 metres wide, with an additional 1.2 metres of adjacent pedestrian movement space. Payment for car charging is made through Charge Place Scotland, a national scheme that users sign up to allow them to pay for the electricity they use through an app or a card. There are 1,272 Trina solar panels, generating an estimated 300,644 kilowatts of energy annually. The blue-top solar canopies cover 2,082 square metres, equivalent to almost a third of a football pitch, to give you an idea of the scale. The energy generated is stored in 3 storage systems capable of storing up to 201 kilowatt hours of energy and delivering up to 183 kilowatts of power. Falkirk are passionate in delivering against their climate emergency goals. By investing the £1.4 million to create this facility, they will save 75 tonnes of carbon every year by generating over 30% of their own electricity on site. To add perspective, 1 tonne of CO2 is equal to the activities of 1 UK resident over 2 months, as you can see from the graphic. So to give you a further feel for what 1 tonne of CO2 is equivalent to, It could be a single person return flight, Lanzarote to Edinburgh, or 15 low energy light bulbs left on 24 hours a day for a year, or a 36-inch plasma TV left on for 24 hours a day for a whole year, or finally a 1 litre kettle boiled 58 times a day for a year. Apologies. So some operational data on the facility. So it opened at 10 AM on the 31st of March 2020. Figures below are actually from 2021 period. So the energy generated by the solar canopies is equal to 240,000 kilowatt hours. Energy used by customers was 206,949 kilowatt hours. We've had 11,209 customer visits. On average, 50 kilowatt charger is 19.3 kilowatt hours, and the average for a 22 kilowatt charger is 13 kilowatt hours. Today, the facility is overperforming against its initial business case in every category, as you can see from the figures on the slide. As I said, the facility is performing well, and the energy generated by the solar panels, was 240,000 kilowatt hours in 2020, and the energy used by customers was less than that. Although the site is important energy now, as the usage has increased, it was never expected to be wholly self-sufficient. But on a sunny day, with a full battery store and low demand, energy is sold back to the grid. This is an income opportunity for our client. Also, initially the charging was free to draw people in. Falkirk Council are now charging customers and actually making a small income from this too. Some further highlights then. So these are the year-on-year growth figures for the facility since it opened in 2020. As you can see for yourself, there is a very obvious dip in usage in the 2021-22 period, which is when Falkirk Council introduced charging at the facility. Up until then, it was free. However, this has not put people off, as growth again has picked up in 22-23 period and is further predicted to grow as the use of electric vehicles becomes more commonplace. Moving on to some key challenges then. Falkirk wanted a design and build approach to provide the facility. In hindsight, perhaps an engineer's detailed design would have been better suited. Also, there were contract delays due to the time taken to procure a supplementary GI, which was underestimated in the contract programme. Unsurprisingly, the civil engineering aspects of the project caused some difficulty with the chosen contractor, who had a mechanical and electrical background. However, through collaboration with ourselves and their proactive approach, these issues were easily overcome. Although time was lost, lessons were definitely learned. Construction adjacent to an operational football stadium also held its challenges for the contractor, and they had to liaise closely with the stadium operator to avoid works or deliveries clashing with events and games, which they did very successfully, I may add. Additionally, the contractor had to deal with constructing the facility below high voltage overhead power lines, as I mentioned in slide 1. As an alternative to mobile cranes, which could not be used because of these power lines, a telehandler was used to lift the canopies in place, and that proved very successful. Okay, so I hope you're all familiar with this slide, as it shows the 17 United Nations Sustainable Development Goals to transform our world. So something we're all concerned with. This particular project ticked several of the categories within this framework. These 6 categories are Number 7, affordable and clean energy. So Scotland's power is almost completely generated from renewable energy, almost 97% in 2020. So when the facility is drawing power from the grid, it's likely to be drawn from a renewable source. Number 9, industry, innovation and infrastructure. So the facility is a major investment by Falkirk Council in sustainable infrastructure and should be there for a long time. Number 11, sustainable cities and sustainable communities. The investment contributes towards the development of sustainable communities in this particular part of Falkirk. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. Well, the facility provides a viable alternative to fossil fuels for the area. Number 13, climate action. So the investment is a positive step forward in Falkirk's commitment to its climate action programme. Falkirk Council declared a climate emergency in 2019. And finally, and perhaps most importantly, number 17, partnerships for the goals. The project was delivered in partnership with Scottish Government, who partly funded it, and WSP through the Professional Services Commission we have with Falkirk, which also delivers each project in a partnership approach. Key innovations then. So up until now, I've not really talked much about how the facility works. The main principle of the facility is that there's a series of charging stations with solar, photovoltaic, PV off-the-shelf canopies. They are constructed over existing and new car parking spaces to capture energy from the sun and store it in a battery store to charge up electric vehicles. During the feasibility preliminary design period, there was an aspiration to use recycled vehicle batteries, but this wasn't a practical solution. So the council went for test volt energy storage batteries, controlled cleverly by the latest hardware and software. The facility links to the national grid and will call for energy when the demand outstrips the energy stored in the battery store. Rapid 50 kilowatt and fast 22 kilowatt charging is really important for EV users, so having that backup from the grid is essential. There are also plans to add an ultra-fast 175 kilowatt charger soon, and the council are considering adding lots of 7 kilowatt chargers under the free canopies, as they are planning to move more staff into the vacant office space at the stadium. So, some key takeaways from the project. Although the design and build approach taken by the council delivered a good quality facility in the end, there were delays during construction, which could have been avoided if our client went for a more traditional engineer's detailed design approach. Also, during the procurement process, more emphasis should be placed on contractors having recent and relevant NEC contract experience. This would save time during the construction works, as the contractor would be familiar with how the contract will be administered. However, there is a good news story around the contractor who constructed this facility. They went on to construct a similarly sized facility for a neighbouring local authority, Stirling Council, which is now operational and is in fact now the largest facility in Scotland. Okay, thank you very much for your time today. We now have about 10 minutes for any questions you may have. So Sharon, if you could maybe read out any questions that you've got in the chat box.
Of course. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Ricky, for a fantastic presentation. So just mentioning again quickly the housekeeping items, you can still log your questions in the question box in the GoToWebinar control panel, and also you can find there the presentation handouts in the handout box. I will start with the first question. What do you believe to be the key barriers preventing progress in the electrification of transportation?
Yeah, that's a tricky one. That's a whole it's a huge subject, Sharon, and quite complex, but from my point of view as an EV user, I think the cost of EV vehicles is far too high and is a significant barrier for certain sections of society. I think the anxiety around the range of these vehicles is also a perceived problem. It's something that I haven't found with my vehicle. I've found that it's, if you plan your journeys well, it's not an issue at all. The charging infrastructure, we're quite lucky in Scotland. We have a really good charging infrastructure, but elsewhere in the country it's not quite as good. So I guess it's a work in progress, but charging infrastructure is the thing. Also capacity, you know, if we were to build lots of infrastructure similar to this, the grid couldn't quite cope with it. So it has to be developed over a number of years, I think. So there's quite a few barriers, and I think these, I think, are the main ones, Sharon, that I would say are an issue.
Thank you.
Maybe you could include charging times as well. It takes quite a long time to charge up if you're on, let's say, a 22 kilowatt fast charger. If you go for a 50 kilowatt rapid charger, you can probably bring your vehicle back up to 80% battery in half an hour, and that's not too bad. It's probably quite a good use of your time to fast. But again, these chargers are probably not quite as common as the 22 kilowatt chargers yet. Okay.
Thank you. Why did the client favor a design and build approach?
Yeah, I think to suit their funding deadlines, they wanted the facility to be built fairly quickly, and it was in their head that a design and build contract would be the best approach. And at the time, we tended to agree with them, actually. We thought that that would be a good approach. However, as it turned out, there were delays in the contract due to just gathering enough information to develop the design quickly. So with hindsight, I think perhaps an engineer's design with WSP designing it to the nth degree would have probably worked out quicker. So that's one of the key lessons we learned on this project, Sharon.
Thank you. Were there challenges getting competitive bids due to lack of experience in building similar facilities in the country to date?
The kind of, if I remember correctly, we did get a few prices in, and they were all similar contractors with a mechanical and electrical background, but it was fairly new, and the questions around experience of similar facilities were answered in the tenders, but yeah, it was a challenge to get a good contractor. But in the end, we ended up with somebody who wanted to work with us and were very proactive in trying to get the facility built. So it ended up being a good news story all round.
Thank you. Could you clarify what do you mean by partnership approach with Falkirk Council?
Yeah, so the commission that we have with Falkirk Council has been a long-standing commission for professional services, and right at the outset of that contract, we set out to deliver projects in a partnership approach with the council. So we all signed a partnership statement, a partnership declaration at the start of the contract. So we wouldn't, we would always try and resolve any issues without going into contractual language, if you like. So all the sort of issues that we face, we chat to our client and try and resolve them early on before they become a problem. And that's worked really well for a good number of years now and has led to us becoming, I think, Falkirk's trusted advisor, certainly on many projects that we carry out with them.
Thank you. You mentioned engineers' detailed design. Could you please elaborate on this?
Yeah, so it's fairly straightforward, really. It's where WSP would actually design all the elements of the facility. So instead of off-the-shelf canopies, we would design the Gullwyn canopies ourselves using our structural engineers. We would design all the sort of PV and supporting software and hardware for the facility. So nothing was left to chance. It's all designed by us, and we then know what we're dealing with when we administer the contract. So that's what I mean by that.
Another question related to this: do you believe that this would be, with this engineering detail design, it will be quicker to build?
With hindsight, I think yes. I think we would have been able to help the contractor with various elements of the works. There were delays not only with site investigation, but way leaves for working around the electrical high voltage power lines that went across the site. With an engineer's design, that would have all been bottomed out before the contract started on site. So yeah, there was an inherent delays within the design and build process that we would have looked into ourselves in much more detail had we done the design. So I think that's the best answer I can give on that one.
Thank you for clarifying this. I will take the last question. Why were used vehicle batteries not viable?
Right, yeah. So that was something that was in the feasibility study that sounded like a good idea, and when we actually looked into it, the amount of used car vehicle batteries that we would have needed to store enough energy to make the site work, it would have taken up a huge amount of space compared to just the sort of new off-the-shelf batteries that we chose in the end. So it was very much site constraints that didn't allow us to use these recycled batteries, if you like.
Thank you. All additional questions will be answered directly by Ricky later on. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Please feel free to reach out to Ricky for any additional questions. And thank you everyone for joining us. And we hope to see you in our upcoming sessions, Nakadan webinar sessions. Thank you everyone.
Thanks very much. Thanks for joining.
Thanks. I will wrap up the webinar now. Thank you.